In 1862, George Grover suggested to the British Army to use balloons as a military asset for reconnaissance and observation. But it would be a further 16 years before the Royal Engineers conducted the first experiments with balloons in 1878. The first British military balloon was called the Pioneer, and this was based upon a balloon designed by Captain J. Templar and was built by the Royal Engineers. Therefore, technically, it was the first British-built military aircraft. Pioneer was launched on the 23rd of August 1878. However, balloons were first deployed by the British Army in 1885 during the Boer War for reconnaissance in Bechuanaland, which is now in Botswana, and Suakin, which is now in the Sudan. In 1888, a school of ballooning was established at Chatham in Kent, and in 1890 this was moved to Aldershot, where the balloon section and depot formed a permanent unit of the Royal Engineers. However, the Air Ministry decided not to continue with using balloons, but the Admiralty wanted to explore the concept further. In particular, the Admiralty was interested in using balloons to damage the high-voltage overhead power lines in German-held territory by using wires that were dragged by balloons. This was inspired by some balloons that were moored in England, breaking free from their moorings during a storm. These balloons drifted across the English Channel and damaged power lines in Denmark and Holland. The Admiralty conducted trials using cables from balloons and calculated there is a 10 to 75% chance of a balloon wire coming into contact with overhead lines during the 30 miles or 48-kilometre transit of the balloon. However, one of the problems with balloons was they were difficult to deploy because they were cumbersome to transport across land and sea to the front line. This also included safely transporting the gas to inflate the balloons. Also, it could take up to 10 hours to fully inflate a balloon, and favourable weather conditions were needed to deploy balloons as an effective military resource. Due to the logistical problems of deploying balloons as a military asset, the British considered the possibility of using alternatives to balloons, and considered the use of kites as a military asset. The Admiralty were keen to see how kites could be used as a flexible and cheaper alternative to balloons. In 1893, Captain Baden-Powell conducted experiments with man-lifting kites, and the kite section of the Royal Engineers was formed in 1894. Kites could fly in winds of up to 50 miles per hour and didn't rely on gas to become airborne. In 1901, Samuel Cody, who was a Wild West showman in a touring company, was interested in kites and produced his own man-lifting kites that he demonstrated to the Admiralty. Cody exhibited a variety of kites, and one of the advantages was that they could carry people in baskets and could be deployed in flying over enemy territory, taking photographs for reconnaissance purposes and surveillance. However, the Admiralty decided not to pursue with the use of kites, and instead they decided to look at using airships, in particular considering the success of the Zeppelin German airships. Britain's first airship was called the Nili Secundus, which means second to none in Latin, and was launched in 1907. This launch took place 7 years after the first Zeppelin flight. Nulli Secundus was a cumbersome airship to manage, but had the advantage of carrying 5 or 6 people in its passenger cradle, and it could be used for observation and to deploy various hand grenades or small arms fire. However, it was vulnerable to AAA ground fire and German aircraft attack. A smaller airship based upon the development from the Nulli Secundus was called the Beta. Beta took the shape of what would be a typical airship design and was used for observational purposes. The Admiralty decided to emulate the success of the German Zeppelins by developing their own large-scale airships. So in 1911, HMS Hermione, otherwise known as the Mayfly, was unveiled. However, whilst being moored at Barrow-in-Furness, the Mayfly was hit by Storm George with 59 knot winds that destroyed the Mayfly by splitting it in half. This highlighted the difficulty in constructing large-scale airships, and the Admiralty abandoned the development of such airships and reverted to designing smaller, more manageable airships. In 1911, the Air Battalion of the Royal Engineers was formed, and they took over the management of balloons and airships, and in May 1912, the Royal Flying Corps was established. It was the Royal Women's Naval Service, the Wrens, who managed the deployment of balloons. One of the lessons learned during the early experimentation with balloons was the use of parachutes that were used by the observers inside the baskets. The Germans realised the value of balloons to the British and decided to destroy them by using their aircraft and AAA ground fire. Although this tied up valuable time and resources of the German military, it did put observers in the balloon basket at risk. So parachutes were developed, and this continued into the use of airplanes in the First World War. The value of deploying balloons continued into the Second World War, with the deployment of what became known as barrage balloons. Barrage balloons were a highly effective defensive resource because they could be tethered to the ground in a close formation with long cables of up to 15,000 feet. This deterred enemy aircraft from flying in between the balloons in case their aircraft was damaged or brought down due to colliding with these cables. Also, the German aircraft had to fly above the barrage balloons in order for them to drop their payload onto British territory. This led to less accurate and imprecise bombing. German aircraft tried to shoot down the barrage balloons in order to make way for other aircraft following them, but that was of limited success for the Germans. The British military continued to use balloons as an offensive weapon, and in 1942, one of the most successful deployments of balloons was called Operation Outward. Between 1942 and 1944, a total of 99,942 balloons were launched from Folkestone Golf Club over German territory, and most of them were weather balloons that were in stock in the Admiralty store. Approximately half of the balloons used in Operation Outward deployed a long, thin cable that was used to short out power lines. The other half consisted of various incendiary devices designed to set fire to forests and woodlands close to the enemy front line. These devices were assigned various code names. One of the incendiary devices was codenamed Beer. This consisted of phosphorus, benzene and water contained in beer bottles. As the balloons travelled over enemy territory, a slow-burning fuse burned through the cord and the bottles were tipped upside down, pouring their contents onto the ground. Another incendiary device was codenamed Socks. These were large canvas bags of incendiary material which contained wool with wire and paraffin, and a long fuse enabled these bags to be emptied over enemy territory. Another incendiary device was codenamed Jelly. This consisted of incendiary jelly contained in a metal box with a fuse igniting the contents inside and caused a fireball to set fire to woodland and heathland. Consequently, this diverted German resources away from the front line. Barrage balloons could be deployed by using vans and trucks, which could be driven to a launch point, offering more flexibility regarding the deployment of the balloons. To offer some indication of the size of a balloon, one can be seen in this image over some houses. This is an image of some balloons which were deployed over Buckingham Palace. Also a balloon that may have been shot down or malfunctioned and is draped over a building. An image of a barrage balloon over the Tower of London. Balloons could be deployed in a long line like this, or they could be deployed in a more spaced out pattern. Barrage balloons were deployed during the D-Day landings, such as this image of Omaha Beach. And also balloons could be used as a deceptive tool, such as tanks. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I look forward to producing other videos soon. Thank you for watching.